The air is thick with smoke, and the bells of small German towns toll in a rhythm that matches the heartbeat of a continent tearing itself apart. It is the dawn of a war that will not merely be fought on battlefields, but etched into the bones of Europe itself. Picture a single match struck in Prague in 1618, its small flame igniting a blaze that will consume the continent from the Baltic shores to the Pyrenees. This is no simple quarrel. It is a storm born from religion, dynastic ambition, crumbling economies, and the mercenary hunger for plunder. The first seconds unfold with urgency, the metallic clang of spurs on stone, a wax seal pressed onto a dangerous dispatch, a mother clutching her child as soldiers trample a frozen field. The viewer must feel this intimately, as if the dust of those boots could settle on their own hands. The 30 Years' War begins as a seemingly local dispute in Bohemian act of defiance against the Habsburg Emperor, but becomes something far more monstrous, a pan-European struggle that will redraw borders, decimate populations, and alter the rules of diplomacy forever. In a single haunting phrase, the hook must embed itself like a splinter in the mind. What began with the throwing of 2 imperial governors from a window would end with the shaping of a new Europe. The year is 1618. Bohemian nobles, incensed by the emperor's violations of religious freedoms, storm into the Prague castle and hurl 2 of his Catholic officials out of a 3rd-story window. The event will be remembered as the Second Defenestration of Prague, and though the victims survive the fall landing in a pile of dung, the symbolic impact is lethal. In an age when religion is politics and politics is war, this act signals open rebellion. The Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand II, a devout Catholic and staunch defender of the Counter-Reformation, will not let the affront pass. His goal is simple: reassert imperial and Catholic dominance over Protestant regions. But the Bohemians, under Frederick V as so-called Winter King, refuse to yield. The Bohemian Revolt ignites the first phase of the war, but it quickly becomes clear this will not be a neat conflict. Early on, the Catholic forces, led by the skilled Count Tilly, crush Protestant armies at the Battle of White Mountain in 1620. Frederick flees into exile, his reign lasting barely a season. For Bohemia, it marks the beginning of harsh recatholicization and the stripping away of traditional rites. But as the embers of Bohemian resistance fade, sparks leap elsewhere. Protestant allies, in the Palatinate, in Denmark, in the Dutch Republic, begin to see their own stakes in the struggle. The conflict spreads like a contagion, carried by grievances, by religious solidarity, and by the ambitions of monarchs who see opportunity in chaos. Enter Albrecht von Wallenstein, one of the most enigmatic figures of the war, a brilliant general and shrewd political operator. Wallenstein raises vast armies not through the imperial treasury but by contracting with mercenaries, funding campaigns with promises of land, loot, and influence. His model turns war into a business, but also into a monster that feeds on the very lands it traverses. Mercenaries, unpaid for months, live off plunder, stripping villages bare, burning homes, spreading famine and disease. In some German regions, up to a quarter of the population will perish, most, not by sword, but by starvation, plague, and the collapse of civil order. Imagine the sound of a town in its final days, the creak of an empty grain barn, the cough of a dying child, the distant clatter of horse hooves that everyone knows means soldiers are coming again. By the late 1620s, Denmark, under King Christian IV, joins the fray, determined to defend Protestant interests and expand influence in northern Germany. But his intervention falters under the combined might of Tilly and Wallenstein. Imperial victories push Protestant forces to the brink, and the Edict of Restitution in 1629 demands the return of lands to the Catholic Church. It seems the emperor's will is absolute until the north wind begins to shift. From Sweden comes Gustavus Adolphus, the Lion of the North, trained in both classical tactics and modern innovations. He brings disciplined infantry, mobile artillery, and a new approach to combined arms. His arrival in 1630 marks a turning point. At the Battle of Breitenfeld in 1631, Gustavus shatters Tilly's forces, proving that Protestant armies can not only resist but triumph against the imperial Catholic machine. Breitenfeld is a revelation: flexible formations, coordinated firepower, and a king who leads from the front. But war is a gambler's game, and in 1632, at Lutzen, Gustavus himself is killed in battle. His death is both a blow to Protestant morale and a reminder that even the most brilliant leaders are mortal. Yet the war does not end. The struggle evolves into something even more tangled. Catholic France, under Cardinal Richelieu, joins the Protestant cause not out of religious sympathy, but to weaken Habsburg power. This shift makes the conflict less about faith and more about the raw mechanics of power politics. Armies march across territories in endless circuits, battles flare and fade, alliances fracture and reform. The devastation deepens. Farms abandoned, cities turned into garrisons, trade routes disrupted beyond repair. And here, halfway through our journey, the voice of the narrator pauses. The screen shifts to the quiet streets of modern-day Munster and Osnabrück, the towns where the war will one day end. The camera lingers on the old council chambers, the painted beams, the sunlight falling on cobblestones that once echoed with the steps of envoys. Over these images, the question comes not as a historian's dry query, but as a personal challenge. If history is a mirror, what does this one show us about the way power, faith, and human cost collide today? A breath, a pause, and then the surge. If you want more explosive deep dives like this where dusty dates become living, breathing drama, subscribe now, ring the bell, and join us every week as we pull the past apart to see how it still pulls on our world. The tone is firm but inviting, the rhythm crisp. This is not an interruption. It is the heartbeat before the next charge. The narrative resumes with the French phase of the war, where the conflict becomes a continental free-for-all. Richelieu's diplomats and generals maneuver to keep the Habsburgs tied down in Germany, while Spanish forces fight to maintain their empire's crumbling edges. Armies are now massive but hollow, their ranks filled with conscripts, mercenaries, and desperate men pulled from ruined villages. The military campaigns become wars of attrition. Victories are measured less in territory gained and more in the exhaustion inflicted on the enemy. The war's cruelty has, by now, outstripped its causes. What began as a fight over religion and imperial authority has become that stalks everyone, regardless of creed or allegiance. Wallenstein returns to the stage after falling out with the emperor, only to be assassinated in 1634 under murky circumstances, perhaps a victim of political paranoia, perhaps of genuine betrayal. His death symbolizes the self-consuming nature of the war. Even the architects of its campaigns are not safe from its hunger. As the 1640s grind on, both sides are drained. The costs in men, in silver, instability are staggering. Negotiations begin in Westphalian towns, and they will drag on for years. The Peace of Westphalia, signed in 1648, finally ends the carnage. Its terms reshape Europe. Each state within the Holy Roman Empire gains the right to conduct its own diplomacy. Rulers can choose their territories, religion, borders are redrawn, and the balance of power shifts decisively. It does not end war in Europe, but it changes its rules. The concept of sovereign equality, the diplomatic congress, the notion that religion can be separated at least in principle from interstate politics, all find firmer footing here. Yet numbers and treaties cannot capture the cost. The 30 Years' War leaves swaths of Central Europe in ruin. Entire generations are marked by loss. Some regions take a century to recover demographically, others never regain their former wealth or influence. The physical scars, the ruins of abbeys, the abandoned villages are matched by the psychological ones. For those who survived, the war is not history, it is memory, a presence in every prayer and every empty seat at the table. In the final scene, the camera pulls away from maps and portraits and settles on a single, intimate image. A child, barefoot, standing in the remains of a burned homestead. She bends down, picks up a single charred spoon, and holds it as if it were gold. The narrator's voice softens. This is the legacy of the 30 Years' War. Not just the treaties or the shifting lines on maps, but the lives shattered, the voices silenced, and the fragile hope that somehow after all this, people might choose a different path. The music fades, the screen darkens, and history's echo lingers, inviting the viewer to carry it with them into the present.